If someone asked you, are you living up to your potential? What would you say? Probably absolutely not, followed by the familiar pang of inner critic shame. You know, the one that says, I should be further along by now. We all do it, comparing ourselves to who we think we should be by now. But here's the thing, you're already performing at your potential for the capacity you have right now. It's not a flaw. It's just physics of the humankind. So today we're unpacking the link between potential and capacity and how each dimension of capacity shapes what's possible and how to move through the natural cycle of expanding it one conscious step at a time. So let's dive in. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alicia St. Germain, founder of the Conscious Edge, where I help women entrepreneurs reclaim time and energy by expanding what they can hold emotionally, energetically, and financially so success feels sustainable and deeply fulfilling. I am excited to have this conversation with you. I was talking to a client on Thursday before I recorded this. And we had this whole conversation about potential. And she asked me to make a podcast episode. After we had the conversation, she said, can you make a podcast episode on this topic? Because I need to hear this again. I want you to go deeper into this. And I think other people would really benefit from this conversation. So someone had asked her, are you living up to your full potential? And she was like, I said, absolutely not. And I could literally see how hard she was being on herself. She is an incredibly accomplished woman who has done so much and resilient and smart and just has some really incredible, talented gifts. And at the same time, she has responsibilities and beliefs about the way that she exists in the world, just like anyone else, right? So we all have big assumptions, which big assumptions are what you believe unconsciously about the world and the way that you exist in it and the way the world interacts in it. It's kind of like the laws your brain made up about the way the world works. And so just like everyone else, anybody looking from the outside in looks at this person and is like, oh my gosh, she's so amazing and so accomplished. And then from the inside, from her perspective, she's like not even remotely tapped what potential she sees for herself. And so what I was explaining to her is that there's this concept of like capacity versus potential. And so often we judge ourselves and we judge other people based on what we see as their potential, or even you could even fill in the word expectation. So potential and expectation can sometimes go a little bit close together as well. And so it creates a lot of shame and disappointment and blame, depending on the context of whether it's you, yourself, or someone else. I think potential can be a very slippery slope for people because you can look at that gap between where you are and where you want to be, the potential, the place that you want to be. And it can be frustrating. And your inner critic will start to dip in there and be hard on you. And for some people, that can really put you into a spiral that is much less productive. So I want to reframe that for you today and really talk about this in the context of capacity, because the truth is, for driven, ambitious people, business owners, anybody who chooses to be an entrepreneur, you are going to butt up against your capacity with each new level you go to, with each new life circumstance that happens. And this isn't just in business. This is taking on becoming a parent. This is taking care of a parent who's aging. Every time, getting married, getting divorced, anytime you have a capacity shift or something that changes in your life, it's going to bump up against your comfort level and what you know and what you think you're capable of. When we think of capacity, it's like what you believe you're capable of. And so I think it's really important to realize and step back for a moment and give yourself some credit for what you have created to this point based on your current capacity. Because if you never increase that capacity, that's up to you, whether you choose to grow or stretch or expand, that is 100% up to you. And to judge yourself based on your current capacity for not reaching a higher potential when you haven't expanded it, when you haven't done the work, either because you haven't taken the time or because it's just too far outside of your comfort zone or for whatever reason, but to judge yourself against a potential that you have that is not in alignment with where your capacity is and what's available to you is really unfair. You're being so unfair to yourself. So I think it's really important to stop for a second and say, okay, given my current capacity, given what my current circumstances are, look at what I have created. Now, is there more available to you? When we think of like potential, is there more possibilities available to you? Yes, absolutely. If you are willing to go and expand, stretch the capacity of what you can hold, absolutely, those things are available to you. So it's interesting because when we look at quantum physics and you look into manifestation, there's some pieces where you think of all possibilities. There are all possibilities available to you. And some of those look like, I already have the wealth that I want to create. I already have the relationships that I want. I already have what I want, because all those possibilities are already available to you. But to access them, I think that's a different piece, right? So to be able to access these things, and it's like, well, if I just believe that these possibilities it's already done, it's already available to me, and I just act accordingly, ideally, yes, that'd be great. The problem is that the human mind, the unconscious, is like, oh, I've got these limitations though, because I don't believe that that's the way the world works, or that's not the way it works for me. And so even though you can consciously decide, yes, this possibility is available to me, the unconscious is like, I'm going to protect us from hurt and pain and bad things that will happen. And so that just doesn't quite seem to always be the case, or it doesn't seem as easy as that it's made to sound. I think that's what I want to say. I want to address today a couple of broader things that I've been thinking about and the way that I frame them, so that maybe perhaps you are a little bit easy on yourself, but also you have a new awareness, or you recognize that in order for you to go to that next level, in order for you to hit those potentials that you've created for yourself, you may have some areas that you want to hone in on to make that easier. So I look at capacity in 5 different dimensions. So one dimension of capacity is your energetic capacity. This is what you have the energy for. You can feel very tired when you've hit your energetic limit. This is also has to do with alignment. When we think about alignment with what you feel called to do, when something feels like you're in flow or it's really easy. If you've ever noticed, you can be doing a lot of things and you can hit the hay at the end of the day and you fall right to sleep and you sleep really wonderfully and you wake up the next morning and you can't wait to get back to what you're doing. And yet you're doing something all day long, like your brain's busy, you're engaged, and energetically you feel full. And then there's when you're out of alignment and it's like you're efforting your way all the way through the day. And even when you go to bed at night, maybe you're up with worries and you're thinking about how am I going to figure these things out? And so you don't sleep real well. And so you can do the same amount energetically in a day and be completely energized for it. Or you can do the same amount and because it's out of alignment and you're frustrated, it can be extremely draining. So sometimes there's shifts that have to be made in the alignment in what you're up to in the world. And they can be just small tweaks. They can be a physical change in a job. Like I think about someone who maybe is working on building wealth on the side of having a really good job or W-2 that gives them a lot of income. You know, there can be some benefits to having a W-2 that provides you with a substantial income that allows you to invest in your wealth creation and gives you access to funds, which is very helpful. It also can be golden handcuffs because it can be really hard to figure out how do I do a side hustle and how do I also do a good job at this W-2 that pays me really well? And how do I justify to make that leap between things? So sometimes it's not a complete change in what you're doing. It's realigning what the purpose of that job is while you're making a transition to a more free lifestyle where you have more autonomy over your time and how and when and where and who with who you work with. So alignment doesn't always mean like a physical change in your environment and what you're doing. Sometimes it's a physical change in how you look at what you're doing that can realign you energetically. The second dimension that I look at is your emotional capacity. So this is how you handle when things don't go maybe quite as you want them to go, how resilient you are, how much stress you can handle based on your thought process, based on what you're thinking. Because what happens is in your unconscious, you have these thoughts that you don't even know are there. Those are those big assumptions I was talking about at the beginning. You have these thoughts, you don't even know they're there. And those thoughts create an emotion. So sometimes when you have something happen and it triggers you, it makes you mad, it makes you angry, or you have ruminating thoughts. I'm thinking about someone who they have a situation arise, maybe at work or with someone that they do business with, or someone that you love, like a family member. And even when you're not in the conflict with that person or in that situation readily, and it's not like there's nothing you can do about it right now, but you're ruminating over it and you're circling around that thought, and it's keeping you from being focused at work or focused at whatever present with whatever it is that you're doing. It's keeping you from being really focused. That's an emotional leak, right? Because you're leaking energy and emotion because you can't get out of the emotion of it. So sometimes when we are able to change up what that unconscious belief is, then that emotion goes away. Now we no longer have that place where we go and ruminate and circle and spiral on something that has happened, and it helps us keep our focus in the area that's really a priority for us. and that's important to us. Now, so the third area we look at is time capacity. The reality is there is a certain number of hours in the day, days in a week, weeks in a month, months in a year, and years in a lifetime. We have a finite amount of our physical time. However, there are ways to expand your capacity from a time perspective by tapping into other people's time, by really taking off things from your plate that are not important. There are things that we serve, things we put our time into because we think we should, because of our belief systems, because of the big assumptions that we make. And they really are not the priority. This is a perfect time example. Over Halloween, my daughter decided that she wanted to dress up as a gladiator. And she had a very specific vision of what she wanted this costume to look like. And so several weeks before Halloween, we're going through and she's like not happy with what is in the children's costumes. And she kept pointing out like all these adult, like male costumes that she really liked and she liked the look of. And then the kids' costumes just looked kind of cheap and she just didn't like it. And I deeply wanted to make her happy. I so wanted to make her happy. And I am capable of sewing. I've sewed their Halloween costumes in the past. And our October was just really busy with a lot of fun things and things that I'm doing in the Conscious Edge and launching a new training series. All of these things happening that are really exciting. And so time started to get away from us, but I told her, you know what? I can make this. I have this capability. I can sew. Well, we've got down to a couple days before we really need to have this put together. And we still have components of the costume, but we haven't really completed it. And I started to worry about letting her down. And so I was faced with this choice of giving up my sleep, giving up and not working on the things in the business that were really important to help new clients understand information or bring new people in, grow the business, and creating this costume. So my time was really crunched. Initially, there was a component of, and it might have even been like it felt wasteful when I'm thinking back to what I was going through. It felt wasteful to spend so much on a costume that she was going to wear for like 2 hours. And so in my mind, I already had the material and things and I could make it. When I stopped back and I looked at the value of my time, I was like, you know what? I need to just go online and I need to order something that I can get here in the next couple days. And so I sat down and I had a conversation with her about time, how we trade our time and how this was becoming a bigger project than I had anticipated and that it was going to come at the cost of some other things that are important for our family. And I shared with her that I was worried about letting her down. I really wanted to make her happy. So we went online, we picked a couple and I said, listen, these costumes might not look exactly how you want them, but there's a couple things here. We can make some adjustments. I have the capability and at least I'll be working from something that will work for us. And secondly, this is something that you're going to wear for 2 hours and this could potentially change. This trade-off can change how the entire fall plays out for me and my business and my company. So if this was you and I was your mom, I wouldn't want you to sacrifice your sleep because you were worried about making your kid happy. I believe that we're okay, that we can get through this together and we can come up with a compromise that's going to work for us. But I tell you this because this is a perfect example of how a big assumption of wanting to please my child, wanting my child to have a certain perception of what her mom could do for her, and not really being honest enough with what the time constraints were. There's a couple things that probably could have been handled differently. Like, here's your budget. Here's your available options. Let's pick from these. But I wanted to give her the world, right? And I think that happens for so many parents or anybody out there. So even if you're not a parent, there's someone in your life that you want to please. You want to make them happy. You want them to be happy, and you will sacrifice yourself in order to do that. And that's where our time capacity comes up a lot of times, is because we have these big assumptions that make us perform in a way that doesn't benefit us, that isn't helpful. In fact, it's hurtful. And so when you catch yourself in a moment like that, sometimes you have to go back and you have to clean it up a little bit, which is what I had to do. I had to go back and I had to clean it up a little bit. And it was helpful for me to get the time back so that I could put the energy and the focus where it really needed to be without sacrificing my relationship with my daughter. Because what was ultimately probably going to happen was I was going to try to work on this through the night, be exhausted, not show up my best, end up short-tempered because I'm exhausted, and potentially risk her not even having a very good costume at all because I couldn't get it finished. And I didn't want to, that would be letting her down, right? So that's part of what happens with big assumptions, is the very thing you don't want to happen happens because you're trying to prevent it. So I might not have potentially finished the costume. She wouldn't have the costume remotely near what she wanted it to be. She would be let down. I would be tired. I wouldn't be showing up my best. And then it would be the very thing I didn't want to happen came true. I let her down. So sometimes we have to go back and we have to clean up after ourselves when we've had a little challenge like that. So there's a lot of aspects of time that do come up with capacity, because we really are dealing with a finite amount of time unless we learn how to bend time a little bit. And the way we learn how to bend time a little bit is by having those heart-to-heart conversations, by providing boundaries around how things are going to happen, by bringing other people into our business to do things that maybe we are proficient at, but take up time and keep us away from our zone of genius. And so we have to hire people, but then we have to be good at having that relationship with people and really leading people, not just managing people, but leading people to the results that we're trying to create in our businesses. And so that's where another level of big assumptions can come in. If you are unable to allow someone else to come in and do things that you're proficient in, and allow them to do it maybe in a different way than you would do it. There's a lot to unpack there, right? So that's the time capacity piece. The fourth piece is financial capacity. When we look at financial capacity, it's interesting, right? Because in that story that I told, there was also another piece of, I don't want to spend that much money on a Halloween costume that she's going to maybe wear for 4 hours. And what I wasn't taking into account was how valuable my time is, and the time that I spend in creating coaching material and frameworks and helping clients to break through their capacity challenges, right? And the brain trust that I have in creating for other people with the things that I'm uniquely gifted in. Sewing may be something I enjoy and that it's a hobby, but in the right moments. And so there was a financial piece there of like, how am I going to spend and invest my money? And we do that all the time in business. We hold back on making an investment that will come back to you tenfold, whether that's investing in a tool or investing in a person that will come back to you tenfold. But because you've got some limitations from a financial perspective, you're unwilling to make that investment because you can do it cheaper. Yes, maybe you can do it cheaper, but what is the cost? Because you can't actually be in your zone of genius. That's the other thing to think about. Another aspect of financial capacity is that there's a certain comfort level that people have making. And this is where we can get into undercharging or not taking enough profit for ourselves or paying ourselves well enough. And it can come in a lot of versions and a lot of different ways. But one aspect that comes up frequently is if I am being paid more, if I am making more, then I have more responsibility. And there's a fear of not being capable of living up to or being worthy of the level of pay that you're receiving for something that you're doing. And so what'll happen is because it feels more safe to stay at a lower level, you don't rise to that full potential. You don't do that because it's more comfortable. There's a certain amount of money that you're comfortable making. In fact, there's actual studies that show that children will generally not exceed the wealth that their parents had. So there's this cycle. When we think about generational cycles, and it takes a change in your mental, like your financial capacity. There's a mental component to that. In order for you to make more than your parents made, there has to be this shift in beliefs around money. In most cases, people do not exceed the wealth or the financial level that their parents had. And so your comfort level, you'll keep unconsciously pulling yourself back to a lower financial level, even though you have a desire to create a higher level of wealth. Unconsciously, your brain will sabotage that and pull you back to that lower level financial capacity that feels comfortable for you. And when I've done work with clients, we've discovered things like there can be a belief that people who make a lot of money are selfish, even though they consciously don't believe it. There's a perception or a belief around money that people who make more are selfish, or that money is dirty, or that if you have more money, you're going to have more problems. So I'm just going to stay at this lower level so I don't have to deal with more problems. I have more responsibility the more money I make. And these are not necessarily true, right? There are aspects of them that can be true, but there's also things to counteract these things as you go to higher income levels, as you make more money. But unless we have the mindset and the financial capacity to deal with that higher level of responsibility and protection that needs to be put in place, unless we have that, we will unconsciously pull ourselves back down to a lower financial capacity. The last of the capacities is relational capacity. And so this is where we talk a lot about people pleasing, very much like I'm a recovering people pleaser. I've got a lot of great boundaries in place. I have learned to let go and not need other people to be okay in order for me to be okay. But the thing that will trigger me and pull me back into that is my kids and my husband. Like, I have to be so careful because I just love them so deeply and I want to do such a good job. And the stakes for me are the highest of any stakes in the world is when it comes to my kids and my relationship with my husband. The stakes are the highest of any. So it is the most likely to pull me back into people pleasing. And I have to be aware of that in order for me to show up my best for them. Because when we are people pleasing, we are actually trying to manipulate people to make sure that if they're okay, then we're okay. It's a really nice way of being a manipulator, but it still doesn't work. So for relationship capacity, we have to be able to set good boundaries with ourselves, but still be aware of how our actions and the needs of others are affected by how we show up. So there's a balance. It's not just boundaries, but it's also really being conscious of the relationships that we want to keep. How do we want to lead? How do we hold people still accountable and yet be compassionate? The relational capacity is another aspect that can affect it. So just in the one story I'm telling you about my daughter, you can see where being in a big assumption, being caught up into that, it can affect all levels of the capacity: emotional, energetic, time, financial, relational. They all touch in that story that I told. So as you're thinking about what's the potential for you in your business, don't judge yourself if you have not hit that potential. It doesn't mean it's not available to you. If you want to think of it as a possibility, this is a possibility that I can access, but what am I going to need to expand? How am I going to need to expand my capacity? What's the work I'm going to need to do in order to expand that capacity, in order to reach that potential? That's really where the focus is. And I think of people sometimes, I imagine like a racehorse. Like you're your body is this racehorse and your brain is the jockey. And your brain will just like, if I just whip it harder and I just push and I use my willpower and I'm just going, then I'm going to cross the finish line. But sometimes you don't. And it's not about beating yourself into the ground until you are just broken. It is about training and getting stronger and resilient. And it takes time and it takes transformation to be able to cross that finish line. You can't just beat yourself across the finish line. So when we are looking at expanding capacity, there's a cycle here that happens. And the first step is really becoming aware that I have hit my capacity. That means I see a possibility that's available to me. And rather than judge yourself or shame yourself or start whipping yourself across the line, rather than doing that, let's be aware that we've hit this plateau. We've hit the edge of our capacity of what's possible. And then we can go into starting to diagnose, okay, what aspects, what capacity, which one of the dimensions of capacity is being affected? Why is it being affected? And how do we change it, right? So the first step is awareness. The next step in the cycle, and you'll hear why I call this a cycle, the next step in the cycle is activation. So this is now saying, okay, I'm aware I have a capacity challenge. Now, if you say to yourself, it is not worth it for me to expand my capacity. Like, I don't want to do what it's going to take to expand my capacity. I've decided I'm happy where I am. Then you have hit your potential. And you get to celebrate that and be okay with that and love your life the way it is and stop beating yourself up for not hitting some higher potential that you've basically decided is actually not a possibility for you because you don't want to expand the capacity. You don't want to do what it takes to expand that capacity. And that is totally fine. But if you want that thing that is possible, then what you're going to have to do is choose to activate. Meaning I'm making the decision to evolve. I'm making the decision to believe that change is possible in order for me to increase my capacity so that I can get what's possible. So in that process of activation, that's when we really look at, okay, what is it? What is the limiter that has you operating at the limit, at your capacity? And so we go through and we look at, what are you believing? What's your, like at your soul level? What is it that you're feeling called to do? Where can we put you into better alignment? What's the financial clarity that you need? What's the strategy that you need in order to actually make all of this happen? Because in financial capacity, this is where the tangible strategic pieces hit the things like spiritual alignment and the emotional system and the mind, right? So the financial capacity and the financial clarity that comes from knowing your numbers, making sure that you're keeping really good books, setting a financial capacity plan, which is how we grow. All of these things come in the activation process where we really get a game plan together in figuring out what needs to happen. Then the next phase is moving into expansion. So in expansion, this is when we then intentionally change behavior. And I use a process called immunity to change, which is what the big assumption is based on, to help design small, safe, intentional behavior changes. And we go through and we collect real world data that we are unattached to the outcomes of. This is not us going in and having to do anything in a particular way. This is just some small, safe behavior changes so that your brain can collect data and start to learn what else is possible besides what you've been believing. And this is where we actually get the expansion on some of these dimensions of capacity. And then after we've gone through expansion and we gather all the data and we've learned where's the new limit, what is true about what we used to believe and what is not true, and what do we want to believe now we integrate it. Now we bring it in to debrief it really and analyze it and see when are you most likely to be triggered. Just like I mentioned, I am most likely to be triggered when it comes to my kiddos and my husband, because those to me are the core thing. And so I have to be really conscious of my triggers to plan ahead for them. And with each time I figure something out, I get a little bit smarter about how I'm going to do it. So life is a journey. It is not a destination. It is 100% a journey of continuous learning and integration. And then we go back into awareness. I've hit a limit, and then we go back through. So as we've created this integration, we really begin to live it intentionally in our life. I said to Neela, next year when we get to Halloween, if you want me to make a costume with you because you don't like the way these Halloween costumes look, let's pull out the sewing machine in August. Let's decide what it is that you want to be. And let's create it when we have lots of time to do it. So again, I'm integrating with new information what I think will work better. And then we'll see how it goes. And that's all we can do. When we start to act differently in our life without having to think about it, when you're seeing results come into your life and all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, wow, like I'm handling so much more than I was before, that's an indication that your now capacity has expanded and you fully have embodied that expansion. You expanded it, you integrated it, and now you don't even think about it anymore. Now you embody it. So as you're in that embodiment process now, your life is working and being who you are. You're like, I'm going to go after the next goal. And then you become aware that you've hit your capacity again. And now you're going to go back through the cycle. So that's why I call it a cycle for expanding your capacity, because with each new level you go to, with each new bigger, juicier goal you go after, you're going to go back through this cycle of expanding your capacity. And you're going to look at the 5 dimensions of your capacity and figure out where you need support and where do you need to expand capacity and what's being affected. And so that's why it's a cycle that we keep going through, and you live this cycle your whole life. You live this cycle, and sometimes in very small ways and sometimes in very big, profound ways. And it is 100% in your control as to what level you want to go to. But what I want you to understand is that your potential is one thing, but what you're willing to do to get to that potential is a completely different thing. And so we cannot judge ourselves. We cannot be hard on ourselves if for not hitting our potential, because you are fulfilling it. You are doing amazing for the capacity that you're at. And if that is as far as you want to stretch and grow, then that gets to be enough. And if you want more, then you do the work to expand the capacity to reach the potential that you desire. So I hope this was a bit eye-opening for you. Right now, as you're hearing this, I am running a series where we dive deeper into each of these aspects that I'm talking about and give you some more coaching around that. The series has already started, but if you're interested in that, if that's something that you want to dive deeper into, you can go to www.consciousedge.com/capacity. And you can register and you'll be able to get the recordings for that capacity series and catch up. If the series has already ended, when you're hearing this, you'll be able to catch the recordings of that and then join it live the next time that I run that. But I hope this helps you understand, maybe in a different way, what is happening here and why judging yourself for not being at your potential is so unhelpful. And maybe a different way to get where you want to go. So with all of that being said, I'm sending you so much love. And if Jonathan were here, he would say, be well. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.